liked him, he made me laugh, and we would occasionally have lunch. We had friends in common. And then, for some reason, I don't remember exactly why. One night we had dinner, and he said he was going to drive to Hartford the next day. He was from Hartford. Did I want to come up? And I said sure. So I went up to Hartford, where his family lived, and I was so taken with this entire family that we started seeing each other in a more serious light. And really, at that time, he was, as I said, working for Time. I had published one novel. Neither one of us was very well established and we went to California and did, and started supporting ourselves by writing pieces. So that required one or the other of us, me to read his pieces, him to read my pieces, and so we began to trust each other as a first reader. We did A Star Is Born in 1972 or 3, yeah. That movie was actually John's idea because it was conceived as a rock and roll remake of A Star Is Born, and I mean the names that came to mind were not necessarily the names that were going to be in it, but it was just two faces. I mean, it was Carly Simon and James Taylor, and Warner Brothers picked this up right away because they had a lot of music, so they got the idea. I mean, they had Warner Brothers music, and so it was very easy to set up a contract, and Warner Brothers set up so we could do the research. I mean, we went out on tour with bands that summer, and then wrote the screenplay, which we had a lot of fun doing because it was totally researched. I mean, it was fun. And you'd find yourself in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, on a summer night with a really bad English metal band. I mean, just hopeless, and being really thrilled. Then it got to be heavy weather on that picture because the question of casting came up, and it just turned out to be a lot of other personalities involved. What struck me about the Manson murders was how, at the moment they happened, it seemed as if they seemed inevitable. I mean, it seemed as if we had been moving toward that moment for about a year. There were a lot of rumors about stuff. There were a lot of stuff going on around town, which you would kind of hear about on the edges of your mind and not want to know any more about. But it was amazing when after the fact, it was kind of amazing to see how many lives had intersected with the Manson families. I can remember we had a babysitter from Nayarit then, and she was very frightened on the night of the murders, or the afternoon when we heard about the murders. And I assured her, don't worry, it has nothing to do with us. But it did. It had to do with everything. Then later I was interviewing Linda Kasabi, and it was the wheel person. She wasn't the wheel man. She was the wheel person, and for the LaBianca murder. And I can't remember, maybe also for Tate. But anyway, the night they did the LaBianca murder, they were driving along Franklin Avenue looking for a place to hit. Now, that's where we lived. We had French windows open, lights blazing all along on the street. John died in December 2003. I started writing it in October 2004. In between, Quintana had been in the hospital the whole time, so I really was not thinking about writing anything. Then I had to do a piece about the campaign that year, so I did the conventions. And then I realized I didn't feel like doing the book I was contracted to do. And at some point I had started making these notes, and so I decided to do that. That's something that everybody who undergoes death and who finds themselves grieving is obsessed with, or maybe overly focused on the idea that they can't show self-pity, that they can't display self-pity. They have to be strong, right? And actually there are a lot of reasons why you're going to feel sorry for yourself. I mean, but it's your first concern. I made a decision when I was in my early 20s. I was writing a first novel at night. I was working for Vogue during the day, and I was bored with working for Vogue, and I was having trouble with the novel. And I was living in one dark room, and I was tired of living this way. And so I decided to become an oceanographer. So I went out to the Scripps Institute to try to find out how to implement this. And of course I learned that I was so lacking in basic science that I would have to go back to, the 7th grade and start over. So I didn't do that. I just read everything I could get my hands on. I taught myself to read, or my mother taught me. Who knows how I learned to read, but I didn't learn to read. It was before I went to school. And so I would go to the library and just take things off the shelf. And my mother had to sign a piece of paper saying I could take adult books. And I just read so ravenously that I would read through whole categories. Like I was crazy about reading biographies because it told how you got from the helpless place I was to being Catherine Cornell, say. I mean, I liked Hemingway. Those sentences just knocked me out. In fact, I taught myself to type by typing out the beginning of Farewell to Arms and a couple of short stories. And I was basically just trying to learn how to type, but you get those rhythms in your head. The thing about Hemingway's sentences is that they are really loaded. I mean, every comma and absence of a comma makes a huge difference, and it's really been deliberated. This is also true of Norman Mailer. People sometimes don't realize what a great stylist he is. One place you notice it is in the Executioner's Song, where he was using a deliberately reduced language. And another place you notice it is in the changes he made, which I think appear in advertisements for myself, the changes he made on the Deer Park. They were changes he calls it totally rewriting it. Well, it was totally rewriting it in terms of its effect, but he was actually doing very little. He was breaking up the sentences. I didn't go to school for a few years. I went to kindergarten and I went to first grade, but then it was World War II, and my father was in the Army Air Corps, and we were following. He didn't leave the country, and we were following him because he was overage. But we were following him from place to place. So sometimes I went to school, and sometimes I didn't, until about the 4th grade, I guess. So I missed. There are certain things I missed, like subtraction, and I still have trouble subtracting. Well, there was no place to live during World War II around Army bases or airfields. I mean, because they were just suddenly there was this huge influx into the town, and I mean, there was just no place to live. I mean, I remember when we got to Fort Lewis, which was the first place we went. I can remember my mother going in every single day to the Army housing office, which was in town, to see if there was a room that day. And meanwhile, we were living in a hotel with a shared bath. I mean, I don't know whether it was because it was a bad. I think it was in sort of a nice part of town. I don't think it was a bad hotel, but it was a period of American life when hotel rooms didn't necessarily come with bathrooms, you know. So my mother would empty. I remember her emptying an entire bottle of pine scented disinfectant into the bathtub every time she gave us a bath. I mean, I think it had an enormous influence on. It made me feel perpetually like an outsider. I was an outsider. And also it very rapidly punctured the idea that I was smarter than other people, because in fact I'd been put ahead in California schools, and I was, of course, because then I hadn't gone to school for a couple of years, immediately put back. And so I was kind of the dumb new girl in the class. And so that had a certain effect. And as far as my sense of place, I mean, I was always yearning. I idealized Sacramento in such a way during those years. I mean, I was just yearning to get home. I was 9 or 10 when we stopped moving around.
When you stopped moving around?
Yeah, we came back. My father went to. I think we came back to Sacramento in 1943 or early 44. He went to Detroit, and we didn't go to Detroit with him. We went to Detroit to settle out contracts. They were trying to settle out the World War I contracts so they could begin to settle out the World War II contracts with the defense contracts. So he was working on that. No, he came back after, when the war ended. But I think Mother just couldn't face looking for another room in Detroit, and this one in Detroit. No, I mean, not at that time, no. I mean, not during that grammar school period. When I got back to Sacramento and was sort of caught up, there were teachers who were very helpful. You know. And I remember a high school English teacher, and I remember another high school English teacher who wasn't mine, but I knew her because she was an actress, and I was doing little theater at the Sacramento had a repertory theater, and I was playing children because I was small. I was small and old enough to go downtown by myself, so that was a perfect setup. I could go to the rehearsals at night and still look like a tiny child. So she always had the lead in these plays that I would play the child in.